What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're working on the Mach 1 here. Since I bought the car probably 8 to 10 months ago, it's had a third gear grind. It's actually progressively gotten worse since I started driving it. And I was driving the other day and it started to have problems going into fourth gear as well. So what I have here is a used transmission from another Mach 1, luckily. It doesn't really matter because the GTs and the Mach 1s all share Tremec TR3650 transmission, so they're interchangeable. The gear ratios inside the transmission are not any different between a Mach 1 or a regular GT. The only difference in the cars is the Cobras have the T56 in them. So other than that, all the manual transmissions in 9904 Mustangs, V8s, are the same transmission, same gear ratios inside, so everything works together. So we're going to be getting that transmission, the old transmission pulled out today and new transmission put in. I was told by the guy that I bought it from that it doesn't grind third or fourth, so hopefully this works out for me. Let's get to it.
Okay, so the first step in doing this whole transmission removal is going to be getting the shifter assembled all torn apart. So you're going to want to take your shift knob off and then pull up this trim around it, which isn't that hard to do. It's just got a bunch of tabs that lock it in place. And then when you're pulling it apart, you're gonna have to unplug the 12-volt outlet. Set that off to the side. Pull your shift boot up. And then there is 2 or 3, there's actually supposed to be 4, I've only got 3 8mm bolts. I believe they're 8mm, they might be 7mm, we'll check here in a second. And take this plate up, take your shifter off. So I actually have a Steeda Tri-X short throw shifter in here, so you're going to want to take these screws out and take this arm off and then take this plate up so that the shifter is shorter and has the ability to go out of the car. You can, if you want to, when you're taking this apart, take this plate off, take your shifter off, and there's 313s on the top of the transmission that hold the shifter assembly to the top of the transmission. You can take that completely off if you want to. I think that's what I'm going to do just so I can get as much clearance as I can when I'm going down and out with the transmission. So let's get this all torn apart. Alright, so as you can see, I got the shift boot, the little bracket that holds the shift boot down, and then the shift boot off. Mine's a little rough shape, but I mean, it does what it's got to do. It's just to keep dust and stuff like that from getting inside the car from outside, because this is an opening to the outside of the car. I took my 13s out that hold my shifter into the transmission, and then tried to pull on it and pry on it, and apparently I did a really good job of RTVing the shifter to the top of the transmission because it will not come off. So took the little angled arm off of the shifter. I'm going to try to, once the transmission's tipped down far enough, to see if I can't get like a pry bar or something like that in from the side, or a screwdriver in from the side underneath the car to knock in between this shifter and the transmission housing just to get this shifter off. So I'll show you that when I try it underneath the car. Next step is to get your battery and negative cable disconnected. You're going to have to pull the starter out in order to pull the transmission out, so you got to make sure that your negative cable is disconnected so you don't arc the power cables for the starter off of anything and cause yourself more problems. So we're going to get this negative cable off. Alright, next step after getting your battery unhooked is going to be to get your exhaust pulled down. You have a connector up there, the green one, for this oxygen sensor. You have another green connector over here for this oxygen sensor, and then that blue one and that blue connector right there are for your rear oxygen sensors. I don't have mine hooked up because I have a aftermarket BBK off-road X-pipe, and the oxygen sensors are mounted too far back to connect to the factory sensors. I actually just never bought the extensions because check engine light's on and I'm in a non-emissions county, so I'm not really too concerned about it. And then when you're coming down with your exhaust, your bolts on your manifold are going to be 15s on both sides. And then on my BBK exhaust, my bolts holding my exhaust, my X-pipe to the rest of my exhaust are 14s. So let's get that pulled off. All right, exhaust is out of the way, as you guys can see, on both sides. And then I got it off of these clamps here. Next step is going to be to get your drive shaft off. These bolts here, and 2 more bolts on the other side, and we'll get that taken off. All right, so as you can see, we got the drive shaft out. Important note when you're working with these, I wanted to point out, is these are 12-point bolts. They are 12mm 12-point. You got to make sure that you have a 12-point socket and or wrench when you're taking these off, because a 6-point won't fit on there. And at least I don't think it will. I don't have a 6-point to know. But if it does fit on there, you're going to run the risk of rounding this thing off. So make sure that you have a 12-point wrench, socket, whatever. So next we're going to get to pulling the starter out. You got to take the power wire off and the solenoid activation wire off, and then there's 3 13s holding the starter in. The top one is kind of hard to get to. You can feel it with your hand. It's up here. You can feel it with your hand back there, but you can't see it. So we're gonna experiment with trying to get in there, and I'll show you guys how I was able to get in there. All right, so I got the starter out. As you can see, 3 bolts holding it in. I figured out a way to get through there. The 2 bottom ones are really easy to do. The top bolt's hard. I fished this long extension. I believe this is a 24-inch long extension with a swivel 13 on the end of it through this hole right here. In between the exhaust manifold and the top of this motor mounting plate. And if you look on the other side, you can see where it comes out at. You can see right there where it comes out at. That gives you the right angle to be able to get in here to this top starter bolt. As you can see right there, I'm able to get in there and get to that top starter bolt. If you look right there. So I got that top starter bolt out, got the other 2 out, and my starter's out. So next is going to be clutch cable comes off. This is actually really easy on this car. I could see now why people go to adjustable shifter cables, because there's an awful lot of play in this shifter cable, and I'm actually able to slide this up and into that hole right there where this comes out through, and then there's a clip right here. You pop this clip off and you pull the shifter cable through the transmission housing. So I'm gonna get that off, and then there's 3 bolts on this side. There's 2 bolts here. There is 2 bolts on this side, and then there's 2 bolts up on top. So you take all those bolts off, you take your transmission crossmember bolts out, and drop your transmission down and out of the car. So I'm going to work on getting the shifter cable off and start getting the bolts out of the transmission. Alright, as you can see, we're almost ready to come out. Got trench jack in place. Got the 2 bolts on this side, 2 bolts across the front here. Shifter cable I got out of there. And then there's 3 bolts on this side. Make sure you unplug your plug connection here. There's a little wire holding tab here that goes to this hole in the transmission. Make sure you get that out as well. And then connection back here as well. Take that plug connection out. We're going to take these 2 13s out on either side, and we're going to tip our transmission down and get the top bolts pulled out, and then get the transmission pulled off. Alright, got the old transmission out. As you can see, I had to knock the shifter itself off because it was hitting the body of the car, just this piece of this housing here that sticks up higher. So I had to knock that one off. I just stuck a screwdriver between the mating surface and the shifter and tapped it in there until it spread it apart and knocked it off. So I gotta get this shifter taken off of this new transmission, and we'll get the new transmission thrown back in the car. I gotta swap over the throw up rod as well and lube this up and everything like that, but we'll get everything swapped over and we'll get it put back in the car. Alright, new transmission's installed in the car. Just make sure there's actually supposed to be a cover on this, I believe. When you're looking in through here, just make sure that when you're going in, you're getting your input shaft of your transmission lined up properly, and don't push too much on the transmission if it's not in the middle of the clutch, because if you put too much pressure on the clutch, you can actually mess up the disc that's in the middle of the clutch that the transmission spines onto. And then you just got to kind of get your angles and your height right to get the transmission to go through the clutch, and then get the end of your input shaft in your transmission into the pilot bearing and the end of the engine crank. When you're doing, before you put the transmission up in here and start trying to put it in, little tip is to lube up the end of the input shaft of the transmission, as well as the end of it part of it that goes into the pilot bearing. It just helps things slide together easier. When you have metal on metal sliding together, they don't slide easily, and it can kind of give you a little hang up when you're going back together. So just lube that stuff up. It's not going to hurt anything. So I got all the bolts in. Everything's tight all the way around. We're going to get the starter thrown back in, the drive shaft put back in, and the exhaust put back up, and we'll be done with this job. Alright, we got the shifter all put back together, and it shifts through all the gears. just fine. So let's go. We're gonna go out and test drive it. As you could see when I was filling the transmission there, I filled it from the top. There's a fill hole on the side of the transmission. It's right next to the transmission mount bracket, and it's really hard to get into. You have to use like a hand pump or like a electric driven pump to pump the fluid in there. Up here, you could just take the shifter off and pour the transmission fluid in. It makes life a lot easier. So we're gonna go drive this and see if there's any issues with this transmission. Like I said, it's kind of unknown. It was pulled out of a car that was dead. So let's go find out. All right, well, we're out driving it now, and it seems as though everything works just fine. We'll go through the gears here real quick. Slow down. First gear, in the second. The third. And the fourth. No grinds. And then fifth. Seems everything's good. Alright, so just got back from driving the car. Luckily there was no gear grinds. Like I said in the beginning of the video, I bought the transmission from a guy that had the transmission already out of the car. The car that it came out of was dead, so I didn't really know going into it whether or not the transmission was going to be okay, because it couldn't drive the car that it came out of. Sometimes you got to take those risks, you know, when you're dealing with this stuff. I've been looking for a while, and not a whole lot of these transmissions come up for sale for decent prices. Usually people want too much money for them, so I, you know, bid my time and saw this one for relatively cheap, and I took the risk in. It seems to have paid off. No grinds first to second, second to third, third to fourth, fourth to fifth. Reversing gauge is real good. There's no weird noises from the transmission, so we got lucky with this one. If you guys have any comments, questions about this job, please comment down below. Appreciate it if you guys could like the video. It lets me know that this is, you know, stuff that you guys want to watch, and please subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys later.